Hi, you're with Bear Friday, Body Language. Recently I saw something no one should ever have to see. The Apple screen of death. As my computer that I use to create the videos that you're watching decided it couldn't find its hard drive. I've struggled to put together a video about James DeGale and Chris Eubank, so this is not going to be the usual body language analysis, but I'm going to tell you some things about the fight. I'm going to give you my opinions on a couple of matters. So here we go. We're going to start with a quick look at James DeGale and his physical condition, which is something that he keeps bringing up and talking about in his interviews, his injuries, how he's in physical condition, how he's in good physical condition. So we join this IFL interview with James at the end of a fitness session. He's going to do some talking with his fitness coach, and I'm going to jump in a few times and make my comments.
Good.
Happy, mate.
Well, that looked tough.
Ooh. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Training smart, extremely fit, without injuries and without taking any of the goodness out of my body. Like,
I'm just going to pause there because this is something really important. So James is talking about his fitness levels and how he's really fit and he's been training well. This is the end of a fitness session, and one of the main indicators of fitness, an important indicator when you're a trainer that you look for, is recovery rate. They actually measure, or should be measuring, how long it takes James to go from peak exercise, exertion, high heart rate, and then how long it takes his body to quickly drop back to refuel with oxygen all those muscles that are spent and tired, and to recover. This was particularly important in Anthony Joshua's career, when he spent a lot of energy against Vladimir Klitschko in one of the earlier rounds, but was able to recover and recoup that energy and then finish big. James here has just finished a training session, and he's had time to change his shirt, sit down, get ready for this interview. Coogan's set up the camera, they've lined it up, the trainer's got in the shot, and he's still nowhere near fully recovered, and he's not having to do anything, he's just sitting there. So his fitness is clearly an issue if you look at it in terms of recovery rate, how much he's going to recover in between rounds.
when I was training before, as I say, Nick's educated me a lot about training and about the sports science side and nutrition, fitness, my strength. You speak to him, you know.
And he actually defers to the trainer here because he's so out of breath that he can't continue his list. But again, it's a worry that he's now being educated at the end of his career about fitness, nutrition. You'd have thought he would have known a lot of those things already. So why is it something he's having to be educated on now? I know there are new ideas in sports science, there always are. I'm pretty aware of them, I sort of follow it. But nutrition, that would have been a basic, it's not a new thing.
Nick, I suppose the first question would be, what's he doing differently now with you that he previously wasn't doing?
The main thing, I mean, since we've been involved, if you look at like the 4 performances we've had together, the most common thing which has affected him has obviously been injury. And so we've kind of looked at some of the...
Just pausing it here quickly, because James is still shuffling around, uncomfortable, and touching his nose, and sort of sniffling for breath. He's obviously got, I mean, you're a boxer, you've been punched in the nose repeatedly. It's not easy to draw that oxygen in, but he's obviously still recovering.
Training that he was doing, which kind of like the risk to reward ratio, so obviously pounding the pavements, doing a lot of high impact work.
And it's really important here again, he talked about a risk to reward ratio of this pounding the pavements and high impact work. We'll come back to that in a second.
And just sort of, you know, we sat down as a team and we were like almost, you know, why are you doing that? A, there's more efficient ways of training with more sort of specific energy systems to box in, but B, less impact. So like the air dime, for instance, there's no impact through the body. It frees him up to feel better, to be able to train the way that Jim McDonald likes to train him.
I'm going to pause that there because Jim McDonald does famously like to train hard, as many boxing coaches do. that old school Rocky flavour, you know, the hill runs, the early mornings, the hard work. And this is really important for this fight, you see, because this sports science guy is explaining that you can do it slightly differently. You can be really fit without having to do those hill runs. You can do different kinds of training that don't impact your body as much. And that's really important for someone who, an elite athlete who doesn't want to get injured, who wants to focus their peak performance for a particular event and peak at the right time. But boxing's different from something like athletics because it is an impact sport. It does require extreme endurance, but you're getting punched in the face at the same time as you're exerting this energy. And I believe that these old school methods are not just about the fitness, but they're also an important part of the psychology, which is that you train under the conditions in which you wish to perform. So if in the 10th round of a 12-round fight, you're going to be completely shattered, beaten up, struggling to find your last reserves of energy, and asked to go on and perform at your highest, maybe perform a knockout, win the last 2 rounds, if that's the part of the fight that you need to train on, to work on, to train, to be better at, the reason that the training is designed to almost break you is that when you're in that situation, you've been in it all the time. It's not new to you. You've been in it all the time in training. At the end of that hill run where you had to do that extra sprint, you've done it before. You know you can perform when you're at your most drained. And so it's not about improving your fitness so that you are so fit that in the 12th round you're not even tired, because that's unrealistic. We know you're going to be tired in the later rounds. We want to make you tired in training and then make you perform when you're tired. You see what I mean? It's about knowing that when you get to those ends of your reserves of energy, that there's something inside mentally that you can draw on to power through and to push on. So taking it soft in training might be better for the sports science. It might be better for your Achilles or your impact injuries. Yeah, theoretically, yeah. You might walk into that ring slightly more athletically fit in certain terms. But if or when you get dragged into the deep water and you're having your energy punched out of you, you're not going to have had that similar experience over and over in training to draw on. And you're going to go to pieces. And that's what I worry about with this change in training style for James DeGale. It's obviously an enforced change in style, or maybe he doesn't just want to do the hard work anymore. Maybe he, and this is where the delusion idea comes in, maybe he feels he doesn't have to do the hard work anymore as an elite athlete, but you can't stop doing the things that made you what you were and expect to still be that. So I worry about this change in training, and it makes me think of the David Hay of old, of late, who was repeatedly telling us that his injuries were fine and that all the modern sports science and rehabilitation was going fantastic. But when it came to the crunch, you know, when it got down to it in the ring, his body just didn't hold out. And it makes me think James DeGale is in a very similar situation.
But without the sort of the high impact of the running and stuff. So you look at, what was it, Truax 2, your Achilles was Achilles from basically trying to get as much training into a short space of time. So he couldn't move around the ring. Truax 1 obviously was rushing back from shoulder. You know, it's
Achilles, everything.
So
it's been mad.
I mean, when we kind of look at Jim McDonnell, we kind of see them, what is classed as kind of the old school methods of, you know, the long distance running, which is slowing down for James now. So is that being cut out of his kind of training, his strength conditioning?
Yeah, I mean, me and Jim have spoken about it, and obviously it's, I mean, James now isn't the young James he used to be, no disrespect,
no,
but you know, you have to be more intelligent with your training, you know, especially as you begin to get to the end of your career. Right.
Now, I would suggest that it's true that you have to be more intelligent with your training, and you can taper down some of that hard slog. But as I said earlier, I don't think you should remove it and switch it out for something different. I think it's still important to do it. But I would say it's not the training you need to be more intelligent with. I'd say it's your fighting. It's the style of fighting. You know, if you're going to be a movement fighter, an elusive fighter, a counter puncher, a sharp, fast jab, then as you get toward the end of your career and your speed starts to leave you and the amount of energy you can exert throughout the whole 12-round fight starts to decline, maybe you need to adjust your fighting style rather than your training style. And I think this is the other delusion that I worry about with DeGale, is that he believes he can still perform in the same style and manner as he used to when he was an up-and-coming, young, hungry fighter. And I think, much like a footballer who moves from being the pacey winger into a more controlling midfield role, an aging boxer needs to think more about how they can use their smarts and their skills to win a fight, as that's on their side. That's one of their advantages, that experience, and not rely on the vigour and physical prowess or speed of youth. And that's where I think James is going to come unstuck. So I'm not big on making predictions, and I'm going to outline a few different ways this fight could go in this video. And the first one, the most obvious one I think, is that DeGale overestimates his own ability, wins the early rounds with that boxing ability, but then Chris Eubank starts to catch up to him and DeGale starts to fade. And in the later rounds, DeGale has a choice to old man Chris Eubank. And if DeGale can do that effectively, to spoil, to hold, to elude, to get the quick counter punch in and then close down the distance and hold on, if he can old man Eubank, then he can beat him on points by winning those early rounds and then closing out and spoiling the later rounds and frustrate Eubank. But I think James DeGale's arrogance will be his undoing, and he'll think that he can put on a boxing masterclass, a display of skill, and his punches will just fall a little bit shorter than he expects them to. He'll just be a little bit too far in range when he thought he was out, and get caught with more than he believes he's getting caught with. And that could ride to a very edgy points decision for either fighter, which Eubank will claim it's his because of the pressure. DeGale will claim it's his because of its skills and his inability to realise how many times he was hit. And that will play out as one of those seems like a fix draw, so they can do a rematch, which we'll come on to later when we talk about bullshit. So I think if DeGale goes into this trying to be elusive, trying to box smart, trying to be the better boxer, then he will either come unstuck or just about manage to see it out. Right, now Eubank, and there's a different story with Eubank. I'm not going to talk so much about his boxing skills. I'll give you a quick rundown. We all know he's got skills, we all know he's got flaws, and we all know that at the top level he's come unstuck when he's faced boxers with a specific action plan that can negate his style. And that action plan involves keeping and the action plan is you keep distance with Eubank as much as you can. Eubank does try to swarm you, but you keep your distance. When he does swarm you, you tuck up and move left or right, or a bit of grabbing, a bit of old manning, move him round, slip out the side. But otherwise you keep distance with your jab. You keep your body away, you keep him away with your jab. And when he does make mistakes and overswing, you use your distance to make him miss, and then you make him pay. You use a lot of lateral movement. You don't step back in a straight line. You move to the side. It's the classic elusive boxer. You know, the boxing skills, that's what defeats Chris Eubank. That's what we've seen so far. So James DeGale believes he has the skills to defeat Chris Eubank, and a top form James DeGale of 10 years ago would certainly have the skills to deal with Chris Eubank Jr. I should keep saying Junior. You understand we're talking about Junior and not senior, don't you? Yeah, obviously. I'm going to give you the little disclaimer that of course I could be wrong here. You know, I could be wrong, and if I am wrong, then I don't want people coming to the channel and saying, oh, you were wrong, because this is just what I think might happen. You know, I'm not Nostradamus, I'm not claiming to know the future. This is just my idea of what I think will happen. I think James DeGale is going to expect a certain level from Chris Eubank, and that he's going to slightly overlook him. I think the training Chris Eubank has done will improve him, and will be surprised at the improvement. Some people think that you can't make a big adjustment in a short space of time, and I certainly believe that. But I think Chris Eubank has always had these skills in his locker, but just hasn't known how to put them together quite in the right way. And I think that's what will be the change. I think he'll seem more fluid. I think he'll make better decisions. And I think he'll cope with the pressure better than he has done in the past. I think in the early rounds, Eubank won't swarm DeGale as much as we expect him to. I don't think he'll start quite as fast as we expect him to. And that will slightly throw James DeGale. I think the early rounds you could give to DeGale, you could give to Eubank, depending on whose work you like the better, but both will land relatively clean shots. Neither will be particularly rocked. I think James's elusive style, his jab, I think that will actually seem to be winning a couple of the early rounds. And if that's the case, I think Eubank will come on strong in the end of those rounds, and it will make it very difficult to score. I think Eubank will steadily increase his volume of punching throughout the fight. So in the middle rounds, I think he will start to give us some more of those flurries that we're used to, and continue to apply pressure to DeGale. And again, I think these middle rounds will be tough to judge, tough to decide who got the best work in. I think DeGale will always walk to the corner with his hands raised as if he's outboxed Eubank, despite having shipped more punishment than a younger DeGale ever would. And I think Eubank will do a very similar thing, returning to the corner in confident attitude. I think the corner man will make a massive difference this time, and will give Eubank the correct advice, and Eubank will follow it through. So in the later rounds, that pressure will increase again, and between about 9 to 12, I think it's 12-round fight, isn't it? In the late rounds, Eubank will turn the screw one more time, and this is where we'll see the cracks appear in James DeGale. Whether he drops DeGale, whether Eubank drops DeGale or not, I'm not sure, but I think he could drop DeGale, and if so, and when DeGale starts to realise he's losing control of the fight, when Eubank starts to increase that pressure, and when I say pressure, I mean he's going to start swarming him again and again. He's not going to give him time to breathe in the rounds and to take a walk. I think that's where DeGale's experience will come in, is his ability to see out the fight, even if it gets rough in those later rounds. And at the end of the fight, I think both men will raise their hands. I think both will claim the victory. I think DeGale will act aghast as Eubank receives the points decision. If he managed to make it to the end of the fight, if DeGale managed to make it to the end of the fight. Otherwise, a Chris Eubank win by, not knockout, but stoppage when the referee runs in. And again, I think DeGale, it'll probably be round 11, and he'll complain. He'll say, that was an easy, you shouldn't have stopped that, I'm still there. I think DeGale will complain at a stoppage. In today's press conference, and this is today, Thursday, today's press conference, DeGale was very agitated, and Eubank wants him to bite and to get into a trade-off. And DeGale did talk about discipline in his interview, despite the fact he lost his discipline in the press conference. However, on the night, I don't think DeGale will lose his discipline. His life raft in there is that he's the more skilled, better technical boxer. But sadly, he won't quite be able to connect as he feels he should. He won't quite be able to evade as he used to. And things that didn't used to hit him, things that used to make an impact for him, are just not quite going to be there for him. And that's going to surprise him as much as anyone else. When you're in that late stage of your sporting career, often you're the last person to realise quite how your skills have slipped. A quick psychological breakdown for you. They're both quite deluded, but recent losses to both parties have been handled quite differently. DeGale couldn't believe he lost to Truax. He could not take it in on board. He didn't believe it. He went back and won the next fight, and it wasn't as clean as he thinks. He didn't just avenge that loss. He still looked a bit scrappy. It was still not his best performance. And after that, he's had another fight, and it's not been his best performance. But in his mind, he's not owned that drop in performance. He's not owned that loss to Truax. You know, his delusion is that these things can't be happening. Whereas Eubank, I believe, if not publicly, privately, has been far more humbled by his loss to Groves, is much more in touch with his limits and the realities of his abilities. And actions speak louder than words, of course. He's now got a trainer. So even if he doesn't say he was wrong, he knows he was wrong. He should have had a more dedicated trainer. That's a psychological difference in approach to the defeats, and that's why I feel Chris Eubank has been much more healthy psychologically, and why James DeGale is much less psychologically healthy in the lead up to this fight. DeGale seems to be unravelling in the recent press conference. His nerves, the pressure, the fact that this really is the end of his career, win or lose. He is at the end phase of his career, and he doesn't like it at all. He does not like it at all. He's bucking against that by behaving in ways his younger self would have done, by being, I won't say childish, but more of a man-child. The man's dem will know what I'm talking about, man dem. I want to go even deeper than that, and I'm going to bring Chris Eubank Senior in here.
Most important contest of his career?
Financially it is, because, you know, the winner of this fight wins a pay-per-view platform. You know, and, you know, over the last 2.5 years, I've done everything I can, you know, at the expense of my family structure, at the expense of my dignity, at the expense of my reputation, to stay with ITV.
Now, it's a bit of a weird interview, and he's done some interviews in the lead up to this fight that you'll all agree with what I'm about to say. He's not seemed quite himself. He's not been as obnoxious. He's not been as cocky. And it might be the Groves loss, but I don't think it is. I think there's something else going on here. I think him and his son have had a more fractured relationship following the Groves loss. I think there's been distance between them, maybe physical. Africa, maybe physical, but maybe more social or personal sort of distance between them. And Chris uses these interviews to talk directly to his son, but he's trying to reinforce this message that he's been there, he's been a fighter, and he's just trying to impart his knowledge and just trying to share the things he knows. Because, and I think the reason he's doing that is because Junior has been unwilling to listen to his advice and has maybe said something along the lines of, I just want to try and do things my way, or something like that. And this has caused some sort of fracture between the two of them. So he's giving his side on this platform of interview, because I guess he feels that he hasn't been able to put his point across directly to his son, who maybe hasn't been listening, or maybe there's been this distance. So he thinks his son probably will watch this, or hopes. At least it's a chance to get his feelings out. And he turns to camera and talks directly into camera sometimes when he does it. So I've gone off on a bit of a ramble there, but I'm trying to do this quickly. I really am, because the fight's this weekend, isn't it? But yeah, so look, the look on his face here, there's a different Chris Eubank here. There's a more considered and more humble, I would say, Chris Eubank, and a slight sadness to him, slightly more sad. And I think that sadness is that he hoped that he'd go on this big journey with his son and there'd always be, you know, father-son team. And now he's realising the actual truth of the reality of the world is not as romantic as you always hoped. And the journey will continue, and his position in that journey will just be slightly different. And he's grieving that loss of his fantasy in a way. It's natural. It's natural sadness. It's fine. And he's also talking about his own career and the things he's done to give his son, you know, the sacrifices he's made and things like that. There's almost tears in his eyes through this. It's very interesting testimony, but that's not what I'm using this piece for. That's not what I'm listening to here. Is what I want to point out here is that Chris is talking about the ITV connection.
Financially it is, because, you know, the winner of this fight wins a pay-per-view platform.
And
Can see where if ITV becomes aggressive in this field, that they can become a juggernaut.
And of course, Eubank Senior spent his entire boxing career fighting on ITV until Barry Hearn sold out to Sky at the very end of Chris's career. But Chris was made a household name through national broadcasters, free-to-air. I've got another video coming up about this, so I won't say too much about that now. But Chris has belief in the ITV model, and I don't know if anyone's been saying this on YouTube or whatever, but I've just got to get this out there. The whole point, the whole Chris Eubank Jr. effect, the whole Instagram thing, he gets criticised for being an Instagram boxer, but what none of these critics understand is that the whole point is not to make Chris Eubank Jr. the best boxer in terms of, in the eyes of the boxing world. It's for the guy on the street who watches Coronation Street and fucking X Factor, The Voice or whatever. You know, for the average people who don't even watch boxing that much, it's for them to hold this guy up as being their number one boxer, the guy they know, the face. And that's why it's all working perfectly. The loss to George Groves didn't even hurt them that much, because the ITV audience, these people are sometimes called casuals. But you know what I mean? Like, the casual audience, they probably didn't even watch the Groves fight. But people know who this guy is, this Chris Eubank guy. And he can sell to the mainstream, not the boxing audience, but just the mainstream ITV audience. And so that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to create this package that ITV can sell. And like he says, ITV haven't been aggressive yet, but he believes that they can be bigger than some other platforms for boxing. I say platforms. I'm not referring to Sky as a platform for boxing. I don't think they are. We'll go into that another way. We'll go into that another time, but he's right. ITV, national broadcaster in everybody's home. You know, put that on Saturday night, 10 o'clock, mainstream, prime time. There's still an audience, despite the internet, despite the modern generation, despite the millennials watching everything on their phones. There is still an audience for Saturday night, prime time, free-to-air ITV. But the mistake they make is by hiding it behind the pay-per-view paywall. So there's a bit of confusion there. But he's right, ITV could be a massive player in this industry. Now, Al Heyman has just done a deal with ITV, his PBC, Premier Boxing Champions, his company, you know, and his stable of fighters, pretty big in the boxing world. So what's obviously happening now is that ITV are going to be more aggressive with their boxing. And the sadness for Chris Eubank Senior is that he's no longer the man when it comes to boxing and management and profile on ITV. He's no longer the man. The man is Al Heyman. When it comes to his son, in terms of boxing and advice, he's no longer the man. The man is Al Heyman. And Chris has had to take a big slice of humble pie from Al Heyman, because when Chris Senior went to meet Al Heyman, he was no longer the man. Al Heyman was the man. And Chris knows it. He feels it. He's been a boxer, hasn't he? He's been in their shoes. So he knows Al Heyman's the man. He goes on in other interviews, I might be able to find clips, I might not, to mention Al Heyman and that he's going to be like an ambassador for Al Heyman from now on. So obviously, he's not put himself above Al Heyman in the pecking order, he's below him in the pecking order. In fact, he's surplus to the pecking order, but Al Heyman has allowed him a sort of, honorary role to keep him happy and to keep things flowing the way Al Heyman wants them to. But let's be clear, Al Heyman is now the man. Eubank Senior is now taking his instruction from Al Heyman. Eubank Jr is now taking his instruction from Al Heyman. Eubank Jr has just had a change of heart and decided to get a trainer from the Mayweather camp. Mayweather, of course, Al Heyman's most profitable fighter. It's all in-house. It's all in-house. Chris Eubank Jr has chosen Nate Diaz, not because he likes him or he thinks his style will gel. Chris Eubank Jr has chosen Nate Diaz as a trainer because Al Heyman told him to. Nate Diaz, in interviews, seems almost rude and nonplussed about his new job because Al Heyman's told him to do that job and now he has to do it. It's not a marriage made in heaven. It's Al Heyman's game of chess. Al Heyman likes to control all the pieces when he plays chess. He likes to be the black and the white pieces. So at the end of the game, he always wins. Al Heyman controls all the pieces, so he always wins. And in this fight we're about to witness at the weekend, and you're considering paying £16 for, even though you could probably stream it for free on the internet, Al Heyman's fighter will fight Al Heyman's fighter, and Al Heyman's fighter will come out the victor. So Al Heyman will be the overall winner. Which is good for him. So my prediction is that Chris Eubank Jr will win. The biggest reason. Chris Eubank Jr has just signed a 3-fight deal with Al Heyman. And Al Heyman is going to be managing the fighters that he promotes on ITV. And the next 3 fights on ITV, certainly the pay-per-views, are going to feature Chris Eubank Jr. Of course there's the backup plan, which is if James DeGale doesn't fall as he's supposed to, as Heyman predicts he will. And the only way that I think this is going to be the case is if he somehow manages to knock out Chris Eubank. Because of course the judging is subjective. If DeGale does manage to pull off the win, then no worries, you've got the rematch. Which is why they're so confident George Groves isn't finished in boxing, because they know that Al Heyman can pay him shitloads of money to fight one of these two lads on ITV. But that's what's going to happen, is that Al Heyman is going to create the future that Al Heyman wants. Heyman knows DeGale, he's managed him for a number of years now. And I won't even get into all that, because I believe Heyman used DeGale as a pawn and did not further DeGale's best interest, and did not further DeGale's best interests overall. But yeah, that's why I believe Chris Eubank Jr cannot lose against DeGale, because DeGale doesn't really have a future. Eubank Jr is a much bigger sell to the casual fan, which is the market they're aiming for. A very large and very powerful market, as Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua know too well. So that's my prediction. And of course, don't go putting your money on my prediction. I'm just a guy on the internet who says what I think. But if it turns out I'm right, then I will be making a big deal about how right I am all the time. No, I won't. If I get into the business of predictions, then I'm going to start getting things wrong. That's just how it is, isn't it? I'm not going to be right all the time. But I feel strongly, for the reasons stated, that Eubank wins, not by true knockout, but potentially by late round referee steps in. More likely by split decision scorecard that leaves DeGale claiming he outboxed him, which of course would leave room for a rematch if this fight did enough buys for Al Heyman to want to do it again. Thanks for listening. Leave your comments. I won't reply to any of them.